Welcome back. The head of the South African National Defence Force, General Frans Mathipa, has now formally and publicly denied that there's a torture squad or death squad within the force. He also says anyone with evidence of this kind of behaviour by military officers has a duty to report it to the correct authorities. The organisation Open Secrets has reported that a unit was involved in the abduction of an Ethiopian national from the Mall of Africa. When the Hawks started to investigate their kidnapping, its officer, Frans Mathipa, was killed. He was shot dead while driving a moving car, meaning it was shot by a trained marksman. Open Secrets has also described how a man was tortured and killed by the same group of people who were investigating the theft of R4 machine guns from the army.
We can state clearly, without any ambiguity, that the Defence Force operates in a constitutional and democratic state, where all government institutions operate and adheres to democratic principles of the state. Therefore, like any other government department, the Defence Force can be scrutinized for anything that might seem to be going against the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and that must be done within the framework of openness and transparency. For the record, there are no military squads in the Defence Force that exist to carry out acts of torture and murder for whatever reasons. The South African National Defence Force stands for the defence and the protection of the people and will always act within the confines of the law and the Constitution. I thank you. It is rather concerning that even with all that has been presented to the public by the said media houses, the law still was not approached, and that there is no formal charges opened against any of the mentioned persons or organizations. The law states in South Africa that failure to report a crime is an offense. It is also concerning that the media houses and the Open Secret chose to withhold the information that can assist law enforcement agencies to investigate and incongruously decided to publish it for whatever reason. This can be equated to a reprehensible motive or an act of defeating the ends of justice.
Well, let's speak now to the subject of that comment. Hennie van Vuuren is the director of Open Secrets. Hennie, good afternoon to you. You made these claims. You've published what you've described as detailed evidence of what you believe this unit has been doing. You heard General Mathipa. They're quite direct towards your organization. How do you assess his response?
Yeah, good afternoon, Stephen. I think one is concerned when General Mathipa makes those kind of comments, suggesting that we have effectively acted in a criminal manner. I think the truth speaks. The evidence we have and the truth is certainly suggests something else. In terms of this notion that evidence was not presented to the military and it being our responsibility, well, you know, all we have to say to the top generals is Open Secrets has published all of our findings and we've made it available. But equally, we've relied on whistleblowers, on people who have information, who've brought this information to the attention of the authorities in different ways. Pulen Komo, a man who alleges he was tortured by the SANDF, including at the instruction of General Mbata, the chief of the army, has gone to court and he's in fact claimed damages from the SANDF, and therefore the chief must have those papers. He even suggested that by throwing words around like sub judice today, and so he's well aware of that. In other instances, some of the whistleblowers we understand and people who've spoken out drew the attention of the military to the abuses and the torture that took place. It was the subject of a board of inquiry, the Moorhouse Board of Inquiry, which produced a detailed report. We haven't seen that report because it's sitting on the desk of the chief of the SANDF, who we told has not acted on any of those findings. Apparently, he is still studying those findings. So he's hidden behind, notions the chief of the SANDF, General Mpanya, and his colleagues of sub judice, etc., which of course is where most rogues in corporations or government or elsewhere who don't want to address the public substantively on issues that are of major national concern go to hide. And I think we find that deeply, deeply disappointing. Attempting to try and scapegoat open secrets, investigative journalists, and ultimately the whistleblowers is not the way you're going to resolve what is essentially a crisis that is presented, the SANDF, and is presented to the president at this point.
Did you speak to the SANDF before you published this?
Yeah, it's our, as investigative journalists at Open Secrets, it's also our responsibility to give those who we have named an opportunity to respond. And so there were a number of people that are implicated in this article, in these articles we published, Stephen, and they include particular officers in the military, General Mbata, who I mentioned, Rear Admiral General Mapoto, the head of military police, and other officials who were directly alleged to be involved in torture. We managed to track all of them down largely, send them questions. We sent detailed questions to the SANDF and followed up repeatedly with WhatsApp messages to Mr. Dlamini, who responded and confirmed they did receive it and said, we will respond when all of this is out. So we've provided every opportunity for the SANDF to comment. They simply have chosen not to do so. And then for them to hold an hour and 40-minute long press conference today and suggest that the reason we have problems in society is because parents aren't raising their children properly is absolutely farcical.
So the evidence then, I mean, you've actually written to the president about this. What do you believe the president should do? I mean, he is the commander-in-chief. He's the only person in the country, as far as I know, that outranks the chief of the South African National Defence Force.
Yeah, indeed. I think we're worried that at this point the generals, the people in charge of the SANDF, are not going to do enough to clean up their own shop. Certainly the comments that what we've heard today from the top brass in the military doesn't suggest that. So what we've done today, Stephen, is we've written to the president in his capacity as chief of the SANDF. We've asked him to intervene and establish a swift inquiry into this matter. And ultimately, he is able to help make decisions to ensure that top people who might be implicated are suspended, that the public, that ordinary citizenry are protected from the military if the military is in fact abusing power to the extent that the whistleblowers have indicated. And this, of course, includes issues of torture and murder. I mean, I think we need to just stress, Stephen, is that the chief of the SANDF has a very, frankly, problematic or worrisome interpretation of the Constitution. Today he said that the special forces, who are believed to have kind of spearheaded this torture squad, that they can operate anywhere outside the country or anywhere inside of the country. Well, in fact, by law, that's absolutely wrong. They cannot operate within the borders of South Africa unless the President and Parliament has approved and authorized that. So there's a complete lack of understanding of some of the constitutional principles or misinterpretation from the side of the chief of the SANDF. It really does suggest that the President must intervene given the serious allegations of extrajudicial killings and torture. And secondly, to add to that, we've also written today, Stephen, to the special rapporteurs who are responsible for, at the United Nations, for investigating extrajudicial killings and torture. We've written to them to ask them to intervene and start their own independent investigations. And obviously, we hope that collectively this will place pressure on those in power to hold the various individuals who are implicated to account and help clean out the criminal elements, certainly within the military, and those who have enabled them to do what is alleged they have done.
There's another organisation, of course, which would have a huge interest in this, and I'm talking about the Hawks. The investigator that was killed while investigating what happened at the SANDF, Frans Mathipa, was a colonel in the Hawks. Now, you would think that Lieutenant General Godfrey Lebeya, the head of the Hawks, would very much want to find out who killed his investigator. Is there any evidence that the Hawks are taking this seriously? I would have thought this is the one body that would be able to say to the SANDF, we want this information.
Yeah, our understanding is that there is certainly an active investigation that's taking place. But, I think that it has now been, Frans Mathipa was assassinated with evidence suggesting that it might well have been special forces in the 6th of August. So we are now a number of months, we're 4 months after his murder. I think that it's now time for General Lebeya to address the country and to make it clear what the implication is of the primary suspects being the military, which we assume is exactly what has happened. We know that in the days prior to Mathipa's assassination, the head of legal affairs in the military, General Manisi, was trying to block that investigation. Pressure had been put on Mathipa. Meetings had been held with the military, and the military simply would not cooperate because Mathipa was investigating special forces for some of those crimes. Today, we heard from the chief of the SANDF that when and if the public has information, they must simply approach the authorities. Well, sir, what has happened, is alleged to have happened, is that your soldiers are alleged to have possibly been involved in the murder of a top Hawks official. That doesn't instill confidence in the public to report crimes, as we all should be doing.
Hennie van Vuuren, thank you, Director.